What if I told you that the harder you try, the further you push success away? That the very effort you believe is noble is actually a signal to the universe that you don't trust yourself? Pay attention, because you're about to unlearn everything you know about achievement. There's a fundamental law most people never understand. Desperation repels, detachment attracts. When you chase something with clenched fists, eyes wide with need, you're not demonstrating commitment, you're broadcasting weakness. And the world, like any predator, can smell that weakness from miles away. Think about it. When you were a child and desperately wanted someone to like you, what happened? They sensed it, didn't they? That neediness created an invisible barrier. But when you genuinely didn't care, when you were absorbed in your own world, suddenly they were drawn to you. That same principle governs everything in life: relationships, money, power, opportunity. The moment you stop needing it is the moment it begins flowing toward you. This isn't mysticism, this is psychology. This is the dark mechanics of human nature that no one wants to admit because it destroys the narrative of the noble struggler. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He wrote not for the desperate, but for those who understood that power isn't seized through visible effort, it's accumulated through strategic positioning. The prince who appears to strain for control loses it. The one who seems indifferent to the throne often wears the crown. Why? Because effort signals scarcity mindset. It tells everyone watching, I don't have this yet. I'm not sure I can get it. I need to prove myself. And in that confession, you've already lost. You've handed your enemies a map to your insecurities. Let me take you somewhere uncomfortable. Imagine two men pursuing the same goal, building a business, attracting a partner, gaining respect. One works visibly, posting every small victory, explaining his process, seeking validation at each step, broadcasting his journey like it's a performance. The other moves silently, taking action without announcement, failing without confession, winning without celebration. Which one do you fear? Which one do you respect? The loud one entertains you, gives you something to watch, perhaps even mock. The silent one unnerves you because you don't know what he's building, how far along he is, or when he'll arrive. Silence is power because it refuses to justify itself. Now here's where it gets deeper. The universe, or if you prefer the collective unconscious, the social matrix, whatever framework you use, it responds not to your words but to your frequency. When you're desperate, your frequency is one of lack. You're literally vibrating at the level of I don't have, and the world mirrors that back to you. You get more experiences of not having, more rejection, more closed doors, more near misses. It's not punishment, it's resonance. You're calling in what you're emanating. But when you detach, when you pursue something with genuine indifference to the outcome, your frequency shifts. You move from lack to abundance, from need to preference. You're no longer saying, I must have this or I'm nothing. You're saying, this would be interesting, but I'm complete either way. That shift, that subtle recalibration of your internal state changes everything. Opportunities you couldn't see before suddenly become visible. People who would have dismissed you now take interest. Why? Because you're no longer pushing energy outward desperately, you're pulling it inward magnetically. Let's apply this to something tangible. You want someone's attention, their affection, their commitment. The common approach: constant messages, visible effort, demonstrations of care, explanations of your feelings. What happens? They pull away. Not because they're cruel, but because your energy is suffocating. It's communicating, I need you to complete me. Without you, I'm less. That's not attractive, that's a burden. But if you pull back, if you focus on yourself, if you become genuinely absorbed in your own development, what happens? They feel your absence. They wonder why you're not chasing anymore. They start to question their own value. And slowly, subtly, the dynamic reverses. They begin pursuing you, not because you manipulated them, but because you stopped being energetically desperate. The same applies to money. the person who needs money, who can't stop. Thinking about bills and debt, who approaches every opportunity with desperation, they repel it. Their energy screams scarcity. But the person who focuses on creating value, who builds without obsessing over compensation, who operates from a mindset of abundance, money flows to them, not through magic, but through the natural consequence of different actions and perceptions. When you're not desperate, you make better decisions. You don't accept terrible deals out of fear. You don't sabotage yourself with nervous energy. You move with precision and patience, and that makes you dangerous. Here's the paradox that most can't accept. You have to be willing to lose to win. You have to genuinely not care about the outcome to achieve it. This isn't about faking indifference. That's just another form of manipulation that people sense immediately. This is about restructuring your identity so that your worth isn't tied to external results. When you can walk away from anything, without your sense of self crumbling, you become untouchable. And the untouchable are the ones who ultimately possess everything, because they're the only ones not enslaved by need. Now let me show you the mechanism. Why does effort repel? Because effort is visible strain, and strain indicates you're operating at your limit. It shows you're stretched, vulnerable, one setback away from collapse. That's not strength, that's fragility dressed up as perseverance. True strength is relaxed. It's the fighter who breathes calmly, the chess player who moves without hurry, the entrepreneur who builds without panic. They're not straining because they're operating within their capacity, with reserves to spare. That reserve energy, that calm in the face of pressure, that's what creates respect and attraction. Think about the people you've feared in your life, not hated, feared. Were they frantic? Were they constantly explaining themselves, working visibly hard to be seen? No, they were calm. They moved with purpose, but without desperation. They spoke less, but with more weight. They didn't chase respect. They commanded it through their presence. That presence comes from detachment, from the internal knowing that you don't need any particular outcome because you'll adapt and overcome regardless. This is where most self-help gets it catastrophically wrong. They tell you to set goals, visualize, work harder, push through, never give up. And yes, action is required. But the energy behind the action determines the result more than the action itself. If you're taking action from desperation, from fear of failure, from need for validation, you're sabotaging yourself. Your energy is contaminated. But if you're taking action from curiosity, from a genuine desire to see what you can build, from a place of already feeling complete, your actions are clean. They're precise. They're effective. Let me give you a framework, the only 3 steps you need. Clarify what you want, not from need, but from preference. Distinguish between, I must have this, or I'm worthless, and this would be an interesting addition to my life. That distinction is everything. Take action without attachment to immediate results. Do the work, make the moves, but don't obsess over when or how it will pay off. Trust the process, yes, but more importantly, trust yourself to handle whatever comes. Observe without judgment. Watch what happens without clinging to outcomes. When something works, great. When it doesn't, adjust. No drama, no spiral, no identity crisis. Just data and recalibration. This approach terrifies most people because it requires them to let go of control. But here's the truth. You never had control anyway. All that effort, all that straining, all that desperate pushing, it was an illusion of control. A way to feel like you were doing something to avoid the terror of uncertainty. But uncertainty is the only constant. The only real power is in accepting that, in moving through it, without needing to grip so tightly. Now let's go darker. Let's talk about why society wants you to stay in effort mode, why the cultural narrative glorifies the grind, the hustle, the visible struggle. Because a person who's desperate and straining is predictable. They're easy to control. They'll accept terrible conditions because they're afraid of losing what little they have. They'll work themselves to exhaustion for validation. They'll buy things they don't need to fill the void their effort can't. But a person who's detached, who operates from abundance, who doesn't need external validation, they're dangerous. They can't be bought. They can't be pressured. They can't be manipulated through fear. They're free, and free people terrify systems built on control. So when you see endless content about grinding harder, working longer, never stopping, ask yourself, who benefits from your exhaustion? Not you. You benefit from strategic action, from intelligent positioning, from calm execution. But exhausted people make great consumers and compliant workers. They're too tired to question, too desperate to walk away, too conditioned to imagine another way. That's why detachment is revolutionary. It's not passive. It's the most active thing you can do, choosing to operate from your own center rather than reacting to external pressure. Here's what happens when you truly embrace strategic detachment. First, your perception sharpens. When you're not emotionally invested in outcomes, you see situations more clearly. You notice opportunities you would have missed in your desperation. You read people more accurately because you're not projecting your needs onto them. Second, your decision-making improves exponentially. You're not making choices from fear or scarcity. You're evaluating based on actual value and alignment. That means fewer mistakes, better partnerships, more strategic moves. Third, your energy stops leaking. Desperation is energetically expensive. It drains you, makes you anxious, keeps you in a constant state of stress. Detachment conserves that energy, lets you move through life with reserve power, and that power is palpable to others. Fourth, you become magnetic. Not in a metaphysical sense, though perhaps that too, but in a practical psychological sense. People are drawn to those who don't need them. It's counterintuitive, but universal. The moment you stop chasing is the moment pursuit begins from the other direction. Finally, you achieve what you set out to achieve, but from a completely different place. Not as a desperate child, finally getting approval, but as a sovereign individual, selecting from available options. The outcome may look the same from the outside, but internally, everything has changed. You're no longer validated by achievement, you're simply adding to an already complete existence. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice. You stop posting your goals. You stop explaining your journey. You stop seeking feedback on your direction. You move in silence, you build in private, you fail without announcement, you learn without broadcasting. And when you finally arrive, people are shocked. Where did you come from? They ask. You were there all along, but you weren't performing. You were working, actually working, not working for an audience. In relationships, you stop chasing. You stop double texting, stop explaining your value, stop trying to convince anyone of your worth. If they don't see it, they're not for you. And that's fine because you're complete either way. You become the person people regret losing, not because you played games, but because you genuinely moved on. You didn't wait, didn't pine, didn't make them the center of your universe. You just continued building your life. And that indifference, that genuine focus elsewhere, that's what haunts them. In business, you stop begging for opportunities. You create value and let it speak. You don't chase investors, clients, or partners with desperate pitches. You build something undeniable and let the quality pull people in. And when they come, you evaluate them just as carefully as they evaluate you, because you know your worth isn't determined by their approval. You're offering an exchange, not begging for acceptance. This is the ultimate power move, caring deeply about the work while remaining indifferent to immediate results. Pouring yourself into the process while detaching from timelines, committing fully, while simultaneously being ready to walk away if the situation no longer serves you. That's not contradiction, that's mastery. That's the balance between action and surrender that ancient philosophies tried to teach, that Machiavelli demonstrated through political strategy, that every truly powerful person embodies whether they articulate it or not. Now I know what you're thinking, but doesn't this lead to inaction? Doesn't this make you passive? No. Detachment isn't passivity, it's precision. You're not doing less, you're doing better. You're not caring less, you're caring more intelligently. You're choosing where to invest your energy based on effectiveness, not on emotional compulsion. That means sometimes you move aggressively, sometimes you wait patiently, sometimes you withdraw completely, but each choice comes from strategy, not desperation. Here's the test. Can you pursue something with full intensity and simultaneously be completely okay if it doesn't work out? Can you want something deeply without needing it for your identity? Can you work toward a goal while knowing you'd be fine if you had to pivot completely? If you can't, you're still operating from fear. You're still a slave to outcome. And that slavery, that energetic desperation, that's what's blocking your success. Let me make this visceral. Think about the last time you desperately wanted something. How did you feel? Anxious, tight in your chest, mind racing, scenarios spinning. Now think about something you casually wanted, something you'd enjoy but don't need. How did that feel? Relaxed, curious, open. Which state do you think makes better decisions? Which state do you think performs better under pressure? The desperate state narrows your perception, makes you grab at anything, accept bad deals, miss red flags. The detached state keeps you open, observant, able to see the full picture and move strategically. This is why the most successful people often seem almost too relaxed. They're not indifferent to outcomes, they're just not emotionally enslaved by them. They've trained themselves, consciously or unconsciously, to operate from abundance even when pursuing more. They know that grasping pushes away while open hands receive. It's a mental trick, yes, but it's also the deepest truth about how human psychology and social dynamics actually work. Now let's address the objection I hear constantly. But if I don't care, won't I just give up when things get hard? This confuses detachment with apathy. Apathy is checked out, doesn't try, doesn't care about anything. Detachment is fully engaged but not identified with outcomes. You keep going, not because you're desperate for a specific result, but because the process itself is interesting, because you're committed to your own development, because you're curious to see what you can build. That's a much stronger motivation than fear-based desperation, because it doesn't burn out. Desperation has a shelf life, curiosity and self-mastery are sustainable. Here's your path forward, broken into clear stages. First, identify where you're currently desperate. What are you chasing that you've made essential to your identity? What outcome are you convinced you must have to be okay? Name it, because you can't release what you won't acknowledge. Second, divorce your identity from that outcome. This is the hard part. You have to reconstruct your sense of self so that you're complete without it. Not in denial, you can still want it, but complete. Your worth isn't tied to whether you get it. This takes time and often requires brutal self-honesty. Third, continue taking action, but from a different place. Not from, I need this to be okay, but from, I'm curious what I can create, or I want to master this skill, or this aligns with my values. The action looks similar from outside, but the internal driver has completely changed. Fourth, practice the pause. Before reacting, before that desperate message, before that anxious check-in, pause. Feel the desperation, acknowledge it, then choose not to act from it. This builds the muscle of detachment. Each time you don't act from desperation, you strengthen your capacity for strategic waiting. Fifth, redirect your focus. Desperation thrives on obsession. When you're fixated on one outcome, one person, one opportunity, you give it too much power. Spread your attention. Build multiple areas of your life. When one area demands too much energy, you have others to invest in. This isn't about not caring, it's about not putting all your identity eggs in one basket. Finally, practice gratitude for what you already have, not as a spiritual bypass, but as a practical tool. When you genuinely appreciate your current state, you stop operating from lack. You might want more, but you're not incomplete without it. That subtle shift in baseline emotional state changes everything about how you move through the world. The mind that has embraced strategic detachment moves differently. There's a calm in the eyes, a patience in the movement, a weight in the words. People feel it even if they can't name it. You're not needy, not desperate, not easily shaken. You're anchored in yourself, and that anchor makes you magnetic, because everyone else is being tossed by their own emotional storms. They're drawn to your calm, not because it's comfortable, but because it's rare, and rarity is power. Let me give you the final perspective shift. Everything you've ever desperately chased and finally received, did it complete you? Did that relationship, that achievement, that recognition fundamentally change your baseline happiness? No. You felt good for a moment, then returned to baseline, then found something new to chase. That's the hedonic treadmill. An effort-based desperation keeps you running on it forever. But if you shift to detachment, you step off the treadmill. You stop believing that the next external thing will finally make you okay. You realize you have to make yourself okay first, independent of outcomes. And once you do that, paradoxically, everything you used to chase starts coming to you, but now you don't need it the same way. You receive it as an enhancement, not a salvation. This is the final evolution, moving through life as someone who wants things but needs nothing, who pursues goals but isn't destroyed by setbacks, who engages fully but can detach completely, who plays the game at the highest level while simultaneously not caring if the game disappears tomorrow. That's freedom. That's power. That's what Machiavelli was really writing about beneath the surface. Not how to gain power through scheming, but how to move through the world untouchable because your center is sovereign. The world fears these people because they can't be controlled through the usual levers of fear and desire. They can't be bought because they don't need what you're selling. They can't be pressured because they're okay with walking away. They can't be manipulated through shame or guilt because their worth isn't external. They're ghosts in the system, moving through it but not bound by it, taking what serves them and leaving the rest without regret or explanation. This is what you're becoming if you truly internalize this. Not cold, not uncaring, but strategically detached. Engaged with life but not enslaved by it. Pursuing excellence without desperation. Building empires without anxiety, forming connections without neediness, living fully while remaining internally free. That's the goal. That's the state that both attracts everything and needs nothing. So here's your final instruction. Stop trying so hard. Stop broadcasting your struggle. Stop making everything mean so much. Take action, yes, but from a place of curiosity and strength, not fear and desperation. Build in silence, move with purpose, speak with weight, but let go of the death grip on outcomes. Trust yourself to handle whatever comes, because that trust, that self-reliance, that's what creates the energetic shift from repelling to attracting. And watch what happens. Doors open that you weren't even knocking on. People appear who you weren't chasing. Opportunities manifest that you weren't forcing. Not through magic, but through the natural consequence of moving through the world with a different frequency. The frequency of someone who doesn't need but chooses, who doesn't chase but selects, who doesn't beg but offers. That's magnetic. That's powerful. That's free. This is the paradox they never taught you. The less you need success, the more it needs you. The less you chase, the more you're pursued. The less you grip, the more you hold. And once you embody this, once it becomes not just a concept but your operating system, you become something rare in a world of desperate strivers. You become dangerous, not through aggression, but through complete self-possession. And that, more than any amount of visible effort, is what changes everything. Now you know. The question is, can you let go of the comfort of effort, the safety of desperation, the familiar pain of struggling? Can you trust yourself enough to release the grip? Can you move through life open-handed, ready to receive or release with equal grace? If you can, everything changes. If you can't, you'll keep running on the treadmill, wondering why you're exhausted but going nowhere. The choice, as always, was never external. It's been internal all along. And now you see it clearly. What you do with this clarity is up to you. But know this, those who understand move differently, speak differently, live differently. And the world, whether it admits it or not, bows to those who've mastered the art of strategic detachment, not because they demanded respect, but because their very presence commanded it without saying a word.